6 months of darkness. Outside, -60 degrees Fahrenheit, nothing but deathly wind. Yet inside a Mandan earth lodge, the air stayed 70 degrees warmer, fueled only by fire and human bodies. No modern technology, just physics and engineering and pure necessity. Survival in homes built for the end of the world was never about brute force. It was about mastering invisible laws no one could name. The biggest threat was not the cold. It was misunderstanding how heat truly works. So how did these ancient builders solve a problem that still puzzles architects today? 6 months of winter in the far north is not just a test of willpower, it is a test of physics. Temperatures plunge to -60 degrees Fahrenheit, and the wind strips heat from exposed skin in seconds. Darkness stretches for weeks, erasing any hope of solar warmth. In these conditions, survival depends on more than just lighting a fire. Heat wants to escape, always moving from warm bodies and flames to the frozen air outside. Every breath, every ember, every calorie is at risk of being stolen by the cold. In an open shelter or a poorly built cabin, warmth evaporates as fast as it is made. The walls radiate chill, the floor sucks heat downward, and the roof becomes a highway for rising warmth to vanish into the night. Fire alone is not enough. Wood piles shrink at a terrifying pace, and even the largest bonfire cannot outlast the relentless physics of heat loss. Human bodies, huddled together, give off precious warmth, but without protection, that heat is gone in minutes. There is no backup plan, no electricity, no oil, no backup generator humming in the background. The only tools are fire, body heat, and whatever shelter can be built with bare hands and local materials. In these conditions, every mistake is punished. If a wall leaks air, if a roof lets heat bleed away, if the design ignores how heat rises and cold sinks, the result is simple. The firewood runs out, the air chills, and life becomes impossible. The real enemy is not the cold itself, but the invisible laws that govern how heat moves. Only by understanding and working with these laws could anyone hope to survive the impossible winter. A Mandan elder stands at the riverbank, scanning the land for the right place to build. She knows the secret lies beneath her feet. The earth, once dug below the frost line, holds steady at 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit, even when the world above freezes solid. With a team of women, she marks a circle 40 feet across, then leads the digging. Soon, 40% of the home's volume will be sunk underground. This is not just tradition, it is physics in action. The deeper they dig, the more the earth shields them from the cold. Every shovelful brings them closer to a stable, livable temperature, no matter how fierce the wind or how long the winter. The framework rises from the pit. Thick cottonwood posts, willow branches woven into a dome, prairie grass layered for softness, then 2 to 3 feet of packed earth, 15 to 20 tons in all, sealed tight against the air. The elder checks the thickness by hand, feeling for gaps, knowing that every inch of earth is another layer of insulation. Above, the dome's curve will shed snow and trap warmth. Inside, the air will stay still, buffered from the chaos outside. The result is a house that works like a living machine. While the world outside drops below zero, the ground's quiet heat seeps up through the floor. The Mandan have no word for R value, but they know this. With Earth as their ally, they can keep their homes warm, their fires small, and their families alive through the longest winter. Inside the finished Earth Lodge, every detail serves a purpose. The dome rises overhead, curving inward to minimize the surface area exposed to the brutal cold. Snow slides off the rounded roof instead of piling up, and the thick earthen shell blocks wind from stealing warmth. At the heart sits a central fire pit, its glow visible from every corner. Above it, a smoke hole at the apex draws air upward, creating a gentle current that pulls fresh air in and pushes smoke out. The entrance tunnel, carved to descend below the main floor, acts as a cold air trap. Heavy winter air settles in the tunnel and never makes it into the living space. Sleeping platforms line the walls, raised 2 to 3 feet above the packed earth floor. Here, the warmest air gathers, sometimes 20 degrees higher than at ground level. It is a simple but profound logic. Put people where the heat wants to go. The dome shape encourages this stratification, letting warmth pool at the level where families sleep. With 10 to 15 people inside, their combined body heat adds up. 15 adults produce about 1,500 watts of continuous warmth, the same as a modern space heater running non-stop. Every breath, every ember, every shared meal adds to the collective heat budget. Lewis and Clark's journals from the winter of 1804 describe how Mandan earth lodges held steady at 60 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, even as their own wooden fort barely crawled above freezing. The difference was not just in the materials, but in the mathematics of shared heat. Communal living was not just social preference, it was survival, engineered into every curve and corner of the earth lodge. In the dense forests of the eastern woodlands, a different kind of winter home rose from the ground, long, narrow, and built for both endurance and efficiency. The Iroquois Longhouse was a communal machine, stretching as much as 100 feet or more, with the largest archaeological finds reaching nearly 400 feet in length. Each longhouse sheltered entire extended families, sometimes up to 60 people, all living under one bark-clad roof. The secret to surviving the cold here was not just in the walls, but in how people shared heat and managed fire. Inside, a central aisle ran the full length of the building. Every 20 to 40 feet, a fire pit burned steadily, each one shared by 2 family compartments set opposite each other. This arrangement was no accident. By clustering families around a single fire, the Iroquois cut fuel use in half, one fire warming 2 groups instead of 2 separate blazes. The fires never truly died. Instead, families took turns tending them through the night, feeding the flames and keeping embers alive, even as snow piled up outside. If one family's fire faltered, a neighbor's hearth could offer a coal to restart it. Survival depended on this web of cooperation, woven as tightly as the bark sheets covering the walls. The walls themselves were a feat of seasonal engineering. In spring, teams stripped massive sheets of elm bark, overlapping them like shingles to shed rain and snow. When summer heat arrived, lower bark panels could be lifted off, letting breezes sweep through the narrow building. As autumn approached, the panels were replaced, and any gaps were stuffed with moss and clay, sealing out drafts. Inside, a liner of woven mats or skins hung 6 to 8 inches from the outer wall, creating a dead air space that trapped still air, the most effective insulation nature provides. Each sleeping platform was raised above the floor, catching the layer of warm air that pooled beneath the arched roof. Orchestrating all this took more than chance. In every longhouse, a household coordinator, often a senior woman, managed the seasonal changes. She decided when to add or remove bark, how to allocate firewood, and who would take the next fire-tending shift. Her authority kept the system running, balancing comfort, safety, and fairness. The longhouse was more than shelter. It was a living, breathing solution to winter, its success measured not by individual effort, but by the harmony of dozens of people acting as one. In the Arctic, survival meant working with almost nothing. No forests for firewood, no earth to dig into, just wind-scoured stone and endless snow. Yet inside an Inuit winter house, a lamp the size of a loaf of bread could mean the difference between life and death. The walls, built from stone and packed with turf, dropped 3 or 4 feet below the surface. Above, a roof of driftwood or whalebone vanished under a thick blanket of frozen earth. The entry tunnel snaked downward for 15 to 20 feet, always beneath the floor of the main room. Cold air, heavier than warmth, pooled in the tunnel and never reached the sleeping platform. Snow, so often an enemy, became an ally. Each block trapped air, 90 to 95% of its volume, giving snow an insulation value of about R1 per inch. Stacked thick, these walls could shield against temperatures of -40 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside, a single seal oil lamp, the kullik, burned with a quiet, steady glow. It gave off just 200 to 300 watts, about the same as a pair of old light bulbs. That tiny output, paired with the heat from a few bodies, could raise the temperature on the sleeping platform 40 to 50 degrees above the entry. Precision was everything. Too much lamp heat and the snow would start to melt, dripping and weakening the shelter. Too little, and the air would freeze, breath turning to frost on the walls. The lamp tender, often the oldest woman in the family, watched the flame with practiced eyes. She trimmed the wick, added seal oil drop by drop, and judged when to let the fire burn high for cooking or low for sleeping. The goal was always balance, enough warmth to keep frostbite at bay, never so much that the house itself began to soften. Even the air was managed with care. A thin glaze of water brushed onto the inside walls froze instantly, sealing the snow and stopping vapor from escaping. This clear ice kept the warmth in and the structure strong. Every decision, from lamp tending to tunnel digging, was a calculation against the cold. In the Arctic, the margin for error was measured in degrees, and the reward for precision was another day alive. 60 degrees north, a line that sweeps across the globe, touching Oslo, Stockholm, Hudson Bay, and the southern tip of Greenland. On paper, these places seem worlds apart. Different languages, different histories, separated by oceans and continents. But the climate pays no attention to such boundaries. Winters here are brutal, stretching half the year or more. The sun barely rises for weeks, and the air can freeze exposed skin in minutes. Timber stands thick in Norway, but vanishes in Iceland and Greenland. Around Hudson Bay, the forest gives way to tundra and stone. Yet everywhere along this latitude, the same problem repeats: how to keep warmth in and death out when the outside world offers nothing but cold. The solutions that appeared were not accidents of culture or quirks of tradition. They were answers to the same relentless questions posed by physics. In Oslo, houses relied on thick timber walls and steep roofs to shed snow. But as Norse settlers pushed west, the forests thinned and the rules changed. Iceland offered little wood, so people turned to turf, cutting blocks of living earth, stacking them into walls 3 to 6 feet thick, and anchoring roofs with layers of sod. In Greenland, there were no trees at all. Stone and turf became the only possible shelter, with whalebones sometimes pressed into service as beams. Across the Atlantic, the Hudson Bay region offered even fewer resources. Inuit families carved homes from snow and stone, building downward into the ground to capture what little heat the earth provided. Despite the distance, the latitude binds these places together. Each community, isolated by geography, arrived at nearly identical solutions. Dig into the ground for stable temperatures, stack earth or turf for insulation, cluster people together to pool their heat, design entrances that trap cold air before it can seep inside. These are the fingerprints of necessity, not preference. The dome of a Mandan earth lodge, the long, narrow shape of a Norse hall, the sunken floor of an Inuit karmat, each is a physical equation solved under pressure. The evidence is clear on any map. Oslo sits at 59.9 degrees north. Stockholm is 59.3 degrees north. Hudson Bay is 60 degrees north. Southern Greenland is 60 degrees north. The climates match, and so do the engineering challenges. Timber, turf, stone, or snow, each material was pressed into service, shaped by the same invisible laws. What emerges is a pattern. When the environment demands it, people everywhere build the same way, regardless of who they are or where they come from. Survival at 60 degrees north is not a matter of taste. It is a matter of physics, written into every wall, every roof, and every hearth along that frozen line. A Norse farm leader stands at the threshold of his longhouse, surveying the heart of his domain. The building stretches nearly 100 feet from end to end, its turf roof heavy with the weight of last night's snow. Inside, the structure is a single open hall, 15 feet wide, with a ceiling that rises 12 feet above the packed earth floor. Along the central axis, a fire trench runs for 30 feet, its embers glowing red in the dim winter light. There is no chimney. Smoke drifts upward, collecting in a thick layer beneath the roof before finding its way out through small, deliberate gaps. Over the years, soot has stained the rafters black, while the lower walls remain clean, a silent record of how air moves through the space. The leader allocates space with care. Family members and hired hands share raised sleeping platforms that hug the walls, each one 2 feet above the ground. The warmest spots, closest to the fire and at the center of the hall, are reserved for the farm's elders and guests. Those farther from the heat, near the ends of the building, sleep in cooler air. This arrangement is not just about status, it is about survival. Warm air, produced by the fire and by every living body, rises and pools at the level of the platforms. On the coldest nights, the difference between the air at head height and the chill near the floor can mean comfort or frostbite. The real secret lies in numbers. 20 people, each giving off body heat, share the hall with livestock penned at one end. 6 cows, each producing over 5,000 BTU per hour, add more warmth than any single fire. Their breath steams in the cold air, their bodies acting as living radiators. The combined output of animals and humans, along with the fire trench, turns the longhouse into a thermal engine. Even when the outside world plunges to -20 degrees, the interior can hover just above freezing, enough to keep water liquid and breath visible, but life possible. Air moves in a slow, deliberate cycle. The fire trench heats the air, which rises and draws smoke upward. As warm air escapes through the roof, colder air seeps in at floor level, often through cracks or the entryway. The balance is delicate. If the smoke holes open too wide, precious heat is lost. If they are too narrow, the hall fills with choking fumes. Over time, the farm leader learns to read the signs, how much draft is needed, how much firewood to burn, and where to pen the animals for maximum effect. The longhouse is not just a shelter, it is a carefully managed ecosystem where architecture, animal husbandry, and human routine are all tuned to the same relentless equation: keep the cold out, keep the warmth in, and survive until spring. But as the Norse push into Iceland and Greenland, the rules will change. Timber grows scarce, and the longhouse must evolve. The next innovation will come from the ground itself. A Norse builder kneels in the summer grass, pressing a spade into the earth. He looks for turf with deep roots, because each block must hold together or the walls will fail when the storms come. With practiced hands, he slices rectangles 12 to 18 inches long and 6 to 8 inches thick. The roots bind the soil, turning each piece into a living brick. He stacks them in neat rows to dry, the air sweet with the scent of grass and dirt. This is not just a wall, it is insulation, structure, and protection all at once. When the time comes to build, the first step is a stone foundation. Stones keep the turf dry, stopping water from wicking up from the ground. Layer by layer, he fits turf blocks together, grass side out and earth side in, until the wall is 3 to 6 feet thick. Each foot of thickness matters. Turf at this density resists the cold, with an R value between 10 and 12, enough to rival modern insulation. In a world without fiberglass or foam, this is as good as it gets. The roof is a feat of strength and patience. A timber frame, scavenged from driftwood or imported at great cost, stretches across the top. Birch bark, peeled in spring, forms a waterproof barrier. Then comes the real work: 2 to 3 feet of turf stacked and tamped until the roof holds 3 to 5 tons of living earth overhead. Grass takes root and grows, the roof blending into the hillside. Sheep may graze above, their hooves tamping the surface and their weight helping the turf knit tighter. The roof becomes part of the landscape and part of the building. The house itself is set into a slope, the back wall buried deep and the front exposed to catch the low winter sun. Dug 2 to 4 feet into the hill, the earth buffers the worst of the cold. Even in the heart of winter, the temperature behind the turf walls and under the sod roof stays steady, the mass of earth slowing the passage of heat. In a place where trees are rare and the wind never stops, the ground itself becomes both shelter and shield. A Norse fire tender crouches beside the central trench, eyes narrowed against the smoke drifting upward. Every morning begins with the same calculation: how wide to open the roof gaps above the fire, how much peat to add, how to keep the balance between warmth and breathable air. There is no chimney, only a shifting patchwork of turf and timber, adjusted by hand depending on the wind and the cold. If the smoke holes are too large, the draft pulls precious heat straight out into the sky. If they are too small, the hall fills with choking fumes, eyes stinging, lungs burning. The right opening is found by feel and habit, not by measurement. A few inches of turf shifted aside, a timber wedged just so. Peat is the fuel of choice here, cut from the bogs in summer and stacked to dry for months. Timber is too rare and costly to burn. A block of peat smolders for hours, giving off steady, gentle heat and a thick, earthy smoke. It burns slower than wood, stretching the winter stores as far as possible. But peat is stubborn. It needs careful tending to keep the fire alive through the long, dark nights. Letting the embers die means hours of labor to coax a new flame from scratch, so someone is always on watch, feeding the trench, stirring the coals, adjusting the air. The work never stops. As the wind shifts, the fire tender checks the roof again, closing a gap against a sudden draft or opening it wider when the hall grows hazy. In deep winter, with every log and clump of peat precious, the smallest mistake can mean either freezing or suffocating. The rhythm of survival is measured in these small acts: the scrape of a turf block, the careful placement of a peat brick, the quiet patience of watching fire and air dance together. This is not just maintenance, it is the daily mastery that keeps the world inside alive while the world outside waits for spring. Spring arrives on the Icelandic farm, and the builder's first task is not planting or ploughing, but climbing onto the roof with a spade. The turf, battered by months of wind and freeze-thaw, has shifted and cracked. Sheep are herded up the sod ramp, their grazing and trampling pressing the grass roots tighter, patching bare spots and keeping the living roof from unraveling. Every year repairs must be made, fresh turf is cut from nearby pastures, bare patches are filled, and the seams between blocks are pressed back together. This is not a one-time job, but a ritual repeated each season, as predictable as the return of the sun. Beneath the turf, the timber skeleton bears the weight of 3 to 5 tons of earth. Each longhouse demands between 40 and 80 large timbers, most of them shipped 600 miles across the open sea from Norway. Timber is precious, too rare and valuable to burn for heat. When a roof begins to sag, the family does not demolish and rebuild. Instead, they carefully dismantle the frame, salvaging every beam and rafter for reuse in the next structure. Some timbers serve 3 or 4 generations, their notches and scars recording the history of the farm as surely as any saga. Major repairs come in cycles. Every 20 to 30 years, the entire roof must be replaced. This means weeks of labor, stripping away tons of sod, lifting off heavy timbers, cutting new turf, and rebuilding the layers from the stone foundation up. Families work together, sometimes calling in neighbors for the heaviest tasks. The work is urgent. Any delay risks leaks, collapse, or the slow loss of warmth that can turn a safe winter into a deadly one. The difference between survival and disaster is measured in the hours spent each year tending the roof, patching the walls, and keeping the living skin of the house intact. This is the true cost of warmth. Not just the materials gathered, but the endless maintenance, the labor of generations, and the careful management of resources that must be stretched across years and even centuries. Each patch of turf and salvaged beam is a promise: as long as the house holds, so will the people inside. 4 hours of daylight. That is all the sun gives in December at 64 degrees north. The world outside is blue and dim, and inside the turf house, every task bends to the rhythm of darkness and light. The day begins in near blackness, with the faint glow of a fish oil lamp flickering in the central room. The lamp's flame is careful, just enough to see hands and faces, never enough to waste precious oil. Its heat is a thread tying the household together, warming the air and casting long shadows on the sod walls. Work clusters close to the lamp and the hearth. Women gather near the fire, weaving, spinning wool, or preparing food, their fingers moving quickly while the light lasts. The best spot is always nearest the warmth and the brightest flame. This is where detailed work happens: mending, carving, shaping tools. Every movement is measured, every hour of daylight spent on what cannot wait until spring. As the sun rises, a shaft of pale light slips through a tiny window or the open door, and all hands hurry to make use of it. Children help sort wool, men repair harnesses or sharpen blades, everyone sharing the precious glow for as long as possible. When the sun drops, the house folds inward. Lamps are trimmed, wicks pinched to stretch the oil. The air thickens with smoke and the scent of burning fish, the walls glowing with a faint golden haze. Now the rhythm shifts. Stories are told, decisions are made, and the day's labor gives way to talk and rest. Sleeping platforms, raised along the walls, are crowded with bodies, each person wrapped in skins, pressed close for warmth. The coldest corners are left empty, the warmest reserved for the youngest and the oldest. In this careful choreography, the house itself becomes a clock. Architecture is not just shelter, it is a map of time, labor, and survival, drawn in stone, turf, and flame. Light and heat dictate who works where, who rests, and who takes the next turn tending the fire. A Norse farm leader in Norway stands in a doorway that his ancestors built 1,000 years before. Each winter, the same walls have held, the same roof has been patched and replaced, the same cycle of labor and repair has continued without interruption. These farms survived the worst that climate could offer, centuries of wind, snow, and cold, because their builders adapted. Timber was used when it was plentiful, turf and stone when it was not. Each generation watched, learned, and changed what was needed. The result is a chain of occupation stretching back more than a millennium, unbroken by war, famine, or even the Little Ice Age. On the other side of the Atlantic, the story ended differently. In Greenland, Norse settlers arrived in 985 CE, bringing with them the knowledge of turf walls, stone foundations, and communal living. For generations, they built homes into the hillsides and tended fires through winters that grew steadily harsher. But by 1450, every Norse farm in Greenland stood empty. The climate had cooled by 2 to 4 degrees Fahrenheit, just enough to tip survival from possible to impossible. The growing season shrank, livestock died in greater numbers, and driftwood for repairs became scarce. Annual upkeep on these homes demanded more than 300 hours of labor, weeks spent cutting peat, patching roofs, and tending fires. Each year, the margin grew thinner. The Norse in Greenland watched their Inuit neighbors thrive, using even deeper, more insulated houses, homes dug further into the ground, relying on snow and stone for insulation, and on seal oil for heat. Yet the Norse clung to their own ways, never fully embracing the subterranean designs that might have saved them. The knowledge was there, the materials were present, but the willingness to change was missing. By the time the last farm was abandoned, the lesson was clear. Architectural identity mattered as much as engineering. Today, the same principles that kept Norse and Mandan homes warm are being rediscovered by architects searching for sustainable solutions. Passive heating, earth-sheltered design, and communal living are not relics. They are strategies proven by centuries of survival. The end of the world for the Greenland Norse was not a single storm or a sudden disaster. It was a slow reckoning with the limits of tradition and the cost of ignoring what the land and climate demanded. Today, as energy costs climb and climate extremes intensify, architects and communities worldwide are revisiting the same physics-driven principles that once kept entire villages alive through Arctic nights. Earth-sheltered homes and shared thermal spaces are not relics, they are models for survival. The science is timeless, only our urgency changes. In a warming world facing unpredictable cold, the wisdom buried beneath our feet may prove more valuable than anything we build above ground. Share your thoughts below.